Yep.
Welcome to this edition of the Native News Update. I'm your host for today's program, Paul Demain. Many of the stories read here can also be found at our website at IndianCountryNews.com. And from the porch of the trading post on the Lakota Reservation, where you can hear the traffic going by, here's the news for the day from the Associated Press and other Native news sources. A 46-year-old Kyle, South Dakota woman will serve just over 3 years in federal prison for stabbing a man in the chest. Shirley Ghost Dog pled guilty in federal court in Rapid City, South Dakota to assault resulting in serious bodily injury and was sentenced to 37 months. According to the indictment, she stabbed Victor Two Crow with a knife on July 21st last year in Kyle on the Pine Ridge Reservation. The Reformed Truth and Reconciliation Commission into Indian residential schools in Canada is running into controversy even before it starts, with one longtime northern leader saying he'll organize an Inuit boycott of the commission unless it has an Inuit commissioner. "We're not Indians, we're Inuit," said Peter Ernick, a former commissioner of Nunavut, who is also a former member of the Northwest Territories legislature and a proponent of Inuit culture. "There's a need to have an Inuk who understands Inuit experience, a need to have an Inuk who understands the culture, the history of residential schools and Nunavut history," he said. Mr. Ernick, a former student of the Chesterfield Indian Residential School, said many of his fellow survivors have told him they won't appear before the commission unless it's one of the commissioners is an Inuit. South Dakota is harming economic development by limiting the number of slot machines allowed in the tribal casinos scattered around the state. A lobbyist for a regional tribal gambling group told legislative panel this week, "I think we're missing an opportunity," says Jeremiah Murphy of the Great Plains Indian Gaming Commission, which includes tribes from South Dakota, North Dakota, Montana, Wyoming, Nebraska, Kansas, and Iowa. Federal law allows tribes to offer the same kind of gambling offered elsewhere in a state, but a tribe first has to negotiate a gambling compact with the state. South Dakota's compacts with tribes limit tribal casinos to 250 slot machines, but the tribes can have an unlimited number of poker and blackjack tables. South Dakota tribal leaders have complained that Governor Mike Rounds has negotiated in bad faith because he will not agree to compacts increasing the number of slot machines. Rounds has said he needs to limit the number of slot machines to make sure tribal casinos do not hurt Deadwood casinos and video lottery casinos, both of which provide the state with some of their revenue. The Yakama Nation is pulling out of a Natural Resources Council that aids Oregon and federal officials with planning cleanup of the contaminated Portland Harbor. The Environmental Protection Agency and the Oregon Department of Environmental Quality are overseeing cleanup with the 6-mile-long Portland Harbor, where sediments in the lower Willamette River have shown high levels of metals, pesticides, and other hazardous substances. But any cleanup settlement should include the Columbia River as well, because the Willamette flows into the Columbia, and its toxins pose a threat to fish in the Columbia River, as well as Yakama Nation Tribal Council Chairman Ralph Sampson said. The Yakamas have treaty rights to salmon and other fish in the Columbia River. Of particular concern to the Yakama tribe are juvenile salmon traveling the last 100 miles to the ocean from the confluence of the Willamette and Columbian rivers. The new top chief of the Anishinaabe Nation says the organization will focus on rights during his term. Grand Council Chief Patrick Madabi was elected this morning at a Grand Council gathering held in Amjawan First Nation near Sarnia, Ontario, Canada. Chiefs and representatives from 42 communities, including Garden River First Nation, were eligible to vote in a traditional stand-up election in which supporters lined up behind the candidates of their choice. "My focus for the Anishinaabe Nation is going to be on rights-based agenda," said Madabi. Madabi of the Ondake Omni Kaning First Nation in Manitoulin Island will be joined by Deputy Grand Council Chief Glenn Hare of nearby Machiging First Nation. In a statement congratulating Madabi, Ontario Aboriginal Affairs Minister Brad Dugard said he wishes to work on shared priorities and build on the foundation laid by Madabi's predecessor. The remarkable story of Minnesota's Red Lake walleye recovery takes another turn this summer one that will have to continue to test the management and resolve of the two sovereign nations that share that lake. The two nations are the United States and the Red Lake Band of Ojibwe, which controls all of Lower Red Lake and part of the Upper Red Lake. This summer, the Red Lake Band will begin commercial walleye netting on the lake for the first time since 1998, when the tribal council banned netting because the fishery was collapsing. In the year 2006, the lake was reopened to walleye fishing far ahead of anyone's expectation. Today, the fishery is healthy. This spring, the DNR increased the daily limit for non-ban anglers. Pat Brown, Red Lake Tribal Fisheries biologist for the band's Department of Natural Resources, said the band would begin netting this summer to keep the band's fishery plant in Redby running at full capacity. Last year, the band harvested about 400,000 pounds of walleye, but it has a quota of 820,000 pounds. Keep this date. This is the 82nd annual Free Border Crossing celebration. That's coming up on Saturday, July 18, 2009. The program starts at 1:30 p.m. at Oaks Park in Niagara Falls, Ontario. It's presented by the Indian Defense League of America and commemorates the Jay Treaty of 1794, which restored the Indians of North America freeboarding crossing rights. Again, that date will be the 82nd Annual Free Border Crossing Celebration on Saturday, July 18th in Niagara Falls, Ontario, Canada. And that is the latest roundup of news from Indian Country on this edition of the Native News Update from the Indian Country Trading Post on the Lakudere Ojibwe Reservation. We want to thank our underwriters for helping underwrite this broadcast and you for joining with us again from the porch. Miigwech.